Welcome to Between Product and Partnerships, a podcast focused on bringing together product, partnership, and engineering leaders to discuss how to build, support, and scale SaaS ecosystems. Presented by the SaaS Ecosystem Alliance and sponsored by Pandium, an integration platform and marketplace for ecosystems. Hi, everyone. Thanks for listening in. If you're new to our podcast, welcome. My name is Liz Garcia. I'm the community manager of the SaaS Ecosystem Alliance, and I'm also on the marketing team at Pandium. Today, I'm talking with Katherine Tooley, who is the technology partnerships manager at LogicGate, which is a modern risk management solution. So thank you for taking the time and showing interest in our podcast, Katherine. Can you tell our audience a little bit about yourself and your background?
Yeah, absolutely, Liz. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Katherine, and I'm currently a technology partnerships manager with LogicGate. I've had a bit of a journey to get here. I studied engineering and physics in undergrad, as well as in my master's in engineering management. And then I started my career as an engineer. I worked in the biomedical space as well as the maritime shipping space. And then in my previous role, I did a rotational engineering program and then moved into their software team at the same company, which is where I got my start in partnerships. So I started managing their partner portfolio and their program. And I found software incredibly interesting, as well as I really enjoyed the social aspect of my job working in partners. And so I started to look for another job that was based primarily in software in the SaaS space, doing the same thing. And that's really where I came across LogicGate. Having been in the compliance and risk background before, the transition to a GRC tool was pretty simple. And now I manage our technology partners as well as work with our product and sales teams.
Nice. Really interesting background to hear from. Uh, what would you say was your primary driver to transitioning to technology partnerships? It seems like you wanted more of that social aspect in your role.
As an engineer, I really enjoyed the analytical piece of my education and of my previous roles, but I found that I worked very well in a collaborative space and more of a customer facing space. So it was a really big transition to move from really numerical engineering, very lab based work to customer focused, client focused, and having that level of professionalism change in my day to day environment. And so, as I started to work with clients at my previous role, I found that I really gained energy through working with other people and was able to translate a lot of our engineering into a conversational or ingestible way that people could understand. And so I found that as a really big strength and decided to capitalize on that moving forward in my career. So I moved over to partnerships completely.
Yeah, I definitely see that as that would be a great strength to have in the partnership space, just because I feel like not too many partnerships professionals have like that really strong like technical background. But to dig a little bit into your day-to-day work, I know in our previous conversation, something interesting that came up was the reporting structure of technology partnerships at your organization and also at previous organizations that you've been with. I know you mentioned that LogicGate, um, your role as a tech partner manager sits under sales. So I'm interested if you can give us some insight into kind of what the rationale for that choice was, because a lot of times in a lot of the interviews that I've done, this role would sit under product, but it does shift and change. So kind of what the rationale for that is, and also what kind of KPIs do you work towards sitting under sales?
Absolutely. So that was a change for me as well, having come from a alliance organization that sat under product. When moving to sales, it really connected me better with the business. So I've seen a lot of value, in my opinion, for sitting underneath sales, as I spend a lot of my day on demonstrations and client calls, which allows me to see kind of firsthand what types of solutions, products, and features that are being asked for by our customer base and by our market, which then allows me to take that data back to our product teams and to our integrations and really focus on gaining technology partners who can create a stickier solution that provides value to what our market base is really looking for. And so that's something that I had trouble with when reporting under product was I, as an engineer, love different cool softwares, cool products that I could partner with, but I was a little out of touch with what was necessary and required in order to propel our business forward. And so sitting under sales with LogicGate really allows me to keep adapting our technology profile with the changing market and GRC better than it did as someone sitting under product looking solely at product features.
Yeah, and I think one challenge that has come up a lot in my conversations that I've had with other tech partner managers is how do you actually track the success of the technology partner program, especially when it comes to business outcomes, not just product outcomes. Could you share some of are the KPIs you work towards? I'm guessing they're more revenue sales focused rather than product focused. Would you mind sharing some, how you track success for tech partnerships under sales?
Yeah, absolutely. So while we do have KPI metrics that I reach towards, our organization is really supportive of the fact that technology partner revenue is not very cut and dry, not very black and white. There's times when we are looking for solutions that will make our product stickier or will support our current customer base that may not be the largest revenue generating, but really provide a feature that we won't, a space we don't want to be in. So we really attempt to diversify our ecosystem. As part of my metrics is really making sure we have a hand in everything that's being asked for is almost more important to us than really major revenue drivers, since we want that diverse ecosystem that will support our customer base. And then the goal obviously is to drive more lead generation, but that really comes from selecting the right partners. So it's not as much of a black and white number, as more of a structured ecosystem that supports long-term growth for the company and the product.
Got it. So yeah, so your KPIs or what you work towards isn't necessarily directly tied to revenue, but you're you're more focused on the enablement of the product and the customer success and the sales teams to 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 drive those numbers.
Right. And while I do have revenue goals, they're not as strong of benchmarks that other departments may have to hit, because there is a lot of gray area with why people are selected to be partners of ours and why we are focusing on the long-term strategy as well.
Got it. And sitting under sales, how do you still remain aligned with product despite sitting under a different organization? Are there any processes or tools that you feel you've implemented or had just been really like have really helped with that alignment?
As someone who sits under sales in this role, it required a lot of a direct effort from myself to, as I onboarded about 9 months ago, I really made an effort to focus on setting up repeated interactions with our technology and product teams in order to best understand kind of the pain points that were existing in integration. And as an engineer, it was best for me to be able to sit in on our technology calls and really hear what were hesitations in certain API integrations, as well as red flags, green flags with the documentation we'd receive from partner companies. So that really allowed me to vet better our technology partners to be better fits. And that was a well received decision by our product team in order to kind of be that first line of defense and in order to help them best position integrations. And so by being someone who is able to communicate with sales where our resource allocation is and where our interests are from the product lens, I'm able to kind of be that bridge between our two pieces of our organization. But what's great about working at a startup is because it's so small, we do interact very much all day long with both departments, and there isn't as much division between product and sales. So everyone really does work hand in hand.
No, that's great. And I'm curious to hear if because one other common struggle that I hear with technology partner managers is getting that buy-in from product for integrations, especially when resources are tight. Um, I'm curious if you had a similar experience with like getting buy-in from product, and just yeah, how you've developed that buy-in from them, what has worked for you.
So what's really great about my background and where I came from is that I did spend time as an engineer. I spent time as a software engineer, as a biomedical engineer. I spent time in the field. I've had that technical background that really allows me to understand what I'm asking for. And so that I think added some credibility to my role when I talk to product, when I talk to integration teams. And this worked the same way at my previous organization as well, that having had that technical background really allowed me credibility and understanding of the amount of resources and time that I was asking for. And so I think that that allows more of an open dialogue between myself and the teams that are actually building, and that it's not a blind request. And so I'm able to hear out kind of their timeline, their resource allocation, the hesitations they have, truly understand what they're asking and what I'm asking for. And then I'm able to validate that from a sales perspective. So it creates kind of the last piece of why we're doing it comes from sales, but how we're doing it comes from product. And I can measure those together in order to create a good roadmap for our integrations.
That's a great quote right there. Just um I'm curious, you kind of mentioned some things of just knowing about like what resources would be necessary, how long things would take. Um, I think it can sometimes be intimidating to tech partner managers of how much technical understanding they should have. Could you maybe speak a little bit more to like as a tech partner manager, like what is the like minimum or the ideal amount of technical understanding that you should have for the role?
Absolutely. I come from the opposite side. So I was a little worried about the lack of sales knowledge and sales experience I had had. It's been a really good experience learning how much I had to learn about how a sales organization operates. And it's, something I'm a lifelong learner. I loved school. I loved changing jobs and learning new industries, but I was really grateful to have had that technical expertise prior to coming in. If I were to give advice to technology partnership managers, I would say it is not as necessary to understand the technology and what goes into actually building an integration as it is to understand the labor, time dedication, and expenses of what you're asking for so that you aren't burning out your teams, you aren't over allocating your resources. You don't necessarily need to understand how the API connects, but understand that it takes maybe 10 hours, maybe it takes 30 hours of how long and how much you're actually asking for from your product teams. And so it's okay that you're not necessarily the one building it, but knowing enough to know how to best support that team is really the most essential piece of being the technology partner manager.
Yeah, and I know you come from a technical background, but do you have any advice of how one could gain that knowledge or where they could look? Um, yeah, any advice?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm currently taking a course on sales through Northwestern. So I would really recommend doing a sort of professional certificate or even just an entry level course. I did a lot of LinkedIn learning when I started this role, digital transformations, integrations and APIs, things like that, more to really understand the jargon that came along with software so that I was understanding what I was actually looking at. And so, since things can change so quickly and coming from field and shipping engineering to software, I had a lot to learn in terms of not having a very strong coding background. So it really helped to kind of seek out free resources or resources through your company that will help you understand the vocabulary associated with software, which is the first step in really understanding what you're looking at.
Yeah, 100%. Kind of on a little bit of a tangent, but I held on to something that you said earlier about identifying red flags and green flags when it comes to partner API documentation. Is that correct? Is what you said?
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
would you mind sharing some of those? I'm actually curious, and I think our audience would be too.
Yeah, absolutely. And so this is kind of expansive across my entire career, not specifically LogicGate, but Having the ability to review organized API documentation, seeing the maturity of APIs and seeing the maturity of the organization with their other integrations. And so when I talk to a potential inbound partner, I like to look at how many partners do they have in their ecosystem? How are they connecting? Do they have webhooks versus API integration? Is it a bidirectional integration? And these are questions that if I can tell from the partner manager that they're versed in, they have answers for, and then their documentation is organized and succinct, it really helps us understand the maturity of that organization when it comes to partnering, because that will be a large determining factor in the success of the integration, as well as the technical support that we'll receive from the other organization. So by looking at those green flags, red flags would be disorganized APIs, unsure of answers to kind of basic questions around how integrations work for them, how their partner integrations work. And that may be a question for a product team more than the tech manager. It doesn't necessarily have to be my role. But those are things that have helped me pick strong partners by vetting those pieces prior to trying to build an integration.
Got it. Yeah. Thank you for sharing those.
Yeah, no problem.
So kind of to pivot back to what we were talking about in the reporting structure, I want to hear a little bit more about just the differences that you experienced reporting under sales versus reporting under product at your previous organization. And I guess to hear some of the benefits and drawbacks that you noticed of each. Yeah, what did you see as the benefits and the drawbacks of reporting under each?
Yeah, definitely. From the lens of my career, where I previously worked and where I previously reported was up through product, and I was an engineer as my label. And so while I enjoyed that a lot, I was very much a technical SME in the partners. I didn't have a very strong lens into how our sales were doing. I didn't have a lens into how my partners were being received from clients. And I almost didn't want one. I was an engineer. I liked being in engineering. And when I moved to LogicGate and moved under sales, it really propelled not only my ability to understand how to select partners, but also more of a leadership lens from my career as well. Um, Being involved in sales really showed me how to best support the business as a whole and less as an individual contributor. And so I had buy-in and visibility into how my role impacted the overall business and the success of the business. And that I think was a really strong positioning for a technology partner manager, because then I can go back to product and say, I've seen this capability asked for 10 times. Let's vet out a partner for it. Let's see what we can do. I think this would support our solution. Whereas if I was in product, I was very detached from the overall business success and was very focused on the success of my specific partners.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I'm curious to, so I know that you mentioned that your role isn't necessarily measured on like direct revenue goals, and it's more focused on enablement of sales and product. And so what are the goals? What are some of the goals that your technology partnership managers at your organization work towards?
Right, absolutely. So I am working towards having an ecosystem in our specific application structure, looking to have about 2 to 3 partners in each area of our technology roadmap that we're focusing in. A big push for my area is to have standardized integrations, and to have repeatability as well in those integrations in order to scale. I also focus a lot in supporting our sales team and really being versatile and audible ready in our integrations. And so being able to speak to our partners on calls that I can't be on and have the appropriate collateral to support their conversations.
Would you mind sharing the some best practices or processes or things that you've implemented with sales that you feel has been really successful in doing that and enabling them to speak about partners, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. So this has kind of been across both organizations. I found that creating a fast one-pager cut sheet on how the two products work together has been really beneficial for calls and follow-up. While you may be on a call talking about our product, you may not be talking to the decision maker there. So having that ability to follow up with documentation on how the program works that's branded and clean shows that really alignment between your company and your partner company. And in terms of enablement internally, things that I found more successful is working with specific role groups as opposed to doing large calls of the entire sales organization. I try to break up my enablement sessions based on the role. That way I can really tailor what I'm teaching and the way I'm positioning to be for their role intentionally, as opposed to a broad sales organization. So showing how in those smaller set calls that are maybe 15 to 20 people, maybe even less, allow for a lot more personal interaction, more questions, and more engagement across the board. So that's kind of been a big learning for me, is how to best get the engagement of our sales teams in order to retain the information.
Yeah, and I'm curious, are you also involved with tracking partner influence on sales? Yeah.
Yes, so I sit on almost every partner call. So I do have a really clear lens into every single opportunity that's involving my partners, every call that's involving my partners. And so that allows me to do a lot of internal tracking on how best partners are succeeding and influencing our opportunities.
Got it. And so the sales team at your organization isn't necessarily responsible for tracking that influence. You're the person who is.
No, I am.
Okay, got it. Um, what else? And when you meant different roles, you're talking about like sales, CS, etc.
Yes.
Yeah.
So basically solution engineers, account managers, managers of current accounts versus outbound sales, things like that really frame differently how our partners could help them. So our professional services as well. So in my previous organization as well, I worked with enabling kind of our sales teams as well as our CS. But our customer success organization, in my previous experiences, was a really strong sector. And so I would enable them a lot differently than I would enable outbound sales.
Got it. And I know you mentioned with the one pager, you would include things like what is the joint story, the use cases. I'm also curious to hear about the enablement meetings. I know you talked about the one sheets and the information that you would involve on there. Anything else that would you would find extremely important to include in the enablement meetings for sales, CS, and the other roles? And also, is this an ongoing enablement process, or is it kind of like we talked about this one partner in this one meeting and then there's no follow-up after that?
Yeah, absolutely. I really think it's essential to bring in the partner. That is step one. Bring in the partner, let them demo their product, let them explain their tech and their value as if they were selling to us. And that really gets our buy-in from our teams to be like, this is a really cool software. Oh, this really could support this piece of ours. And so it really starts to generate that conversation. It generates questions from teams that will then help them position. If they were thinking, if you ask a question, you get the answer directly from the partner, you then can answer that question on one of our calls. So I help to, while I will sit on most client calls as an SME for partner questions that come through, because I know a lot about a lot of our technology, it helps them kind of see questions that they would ask, as well as gather and spark their interest in the partners as well. And then they can talk through where the partner sees our company fitting as well. So it helps bond that relationship between them and their contact at the partner company, because we like to really support that independence of the sales team to reach out to our partners or part of our company as well. So reach out, ask your questions, throw me on a copy, I guess. But it's nice to have that connection made on the teams that are respective on the other partner side.
Yeah, that idea of that like partner road show is really good. And I do like that open line of communication too between the partners and sales. So moving on from sales enablement, I know you are also working with the product team. You mentioned some of the ways that you enable the product team, taking information such as like integration requests and giving them that information. Any other processes or tools that you use to like collaborate with product and enable them in your role?
Yeah, absolutely. Something that I've really found interesting to do with product is that, and this was something that was done for me in my previous role. So I, having not sat under sales, this was done to me, was that they showed that we show how the partners are doing, because a lot of our product teams don't get that lens into sales. And so that was something that I struggled with at my previous role. And so I brought that kind of into my new job, is that I really like to show transparency and how many people are interested in this thing that's taking so much of your time. How's it doing in the sales side of the organization? How is it being received? What are common struggles that we're seeing with clients that that kind of information may not be being passed back to the teams that are actually building it? And so it allows for pivoting in resource allocation, allows for pivoting in long-term strategy, but it also kind of allows for a little bit of joy in, hey, you spent 20 hours building this. Everyone loves it. Like, here's your product feedback. And so that doesn't necessarily, that sales lens doesn't always reach our product teams. And so I found that that's really motivating. And so when I speak in our leadership, integration leadership calls, which is kind of a lot of the product teams that work in between, I'm able to kind of give them a lens into how these integrations that they work so hard on are performing and how they're impacting the business. And so I found that really valuable as an engineer to kind of see how I'm propelling business forward. And so that's been the coolest thing about working under sales, is really seeing my value. And so I hope to kind of bring that into product as well.
Yeah, you can't underestimate the power of joint success, right?
Yeah, it's
Um,
awesome.
yeah. Uh, I so to talk a little bit more about prioritizing integrations. I know like we talked about three roles here. There's product, there's sales, and then you in the middle. How does the collaboration happen when it comes to deciding on what to build, like what integrations to build and prioritize?
Oh, and that's so tough. I, as an engineer, I see some really cool technology that I just love and I could see value in. And sometimes that's not the just driving factor. We have to really take a lot of time to listen to our clients and listen to our market base and see what's coming. For example, in the next few years, there'll be a really large push into ESG, environmental social governance. I love that topic. I think there's some really cool partners out there that we could pursue, and the regulations around it that would really drive the purchase of a tool in ESG are not coming for 5 more years. So while I love the idea, while I love the concept, it may not be the highest priority on our roadmap, since the driver to purchase an ESG tool won't be in place for a few more years. So that particularly is an example of something, as an engineer, separating myself from, I love this technology, it's really cool, to, hey, we're getting asked about this a lot. How do we get a product in here that will support this solution in order to really help our client base? Because this is the highest priority. And that means I have to shift from looking at what is the most exciting new tool to what is the most sticky and what will really help build our product. And so that really, the requests from sales, the great research and data understanding that our marketing teams do, helps us then frame the resource allocation on product as to what goes on our roadmap, how we prioritize which partners get the most resources from there. And so it is a tough place to sit in, because I would love it if we had endless resources in engineering, but it really is about stacking your roadmap to be in the best support of your customer base.
Yeah, so you're saying that it's mostly based on customer requests and also market research from the marketing team of what would propel your solution.
Yeah, and if I come across a tool that I really like or I really think would add value, I will start a conversation, start a relationship, and we'll put a hold until we have till we start getting requests, but we'll have a really friendly relationship. And we've seen success with that a lot of. Then as soon as we have the opportunity, we're ready to go. We have scoped out what we need, but we dedicate the resources as it's requested.
So I'm interested to hear about some maybe pitfalls or mistakes to avoid that you've maybe experienced or challenges that you've experienced when it comes to enabling sales or end product as a tech partner manager.
Oh, absolutely. Plenty of those. A big thing I would say is someone coming, if you came into partnerships from my angle, would be not approaching sales as if it were simple. I think I was so used to the rigor of engineering that when I was placed in the sales organization, I didn't think about the dynamics and level of intellect that goes into navigating client facing interactions. And so I think I had so much to learn, and I would just really advise people to be transparent with how where their struggles are. I always tell people there are a few classes that I didn't do well in school, and people ask me about them. I'm like, yeah, please don't ask me to do that. Like that's not my strength. And so I really leaned on when I moved into this role, I really leaned on I can be a technical SME. Help let me learn the product, let me use the product. But what I'm going to need support on is I don't necessarily understand deal cycles yet. I'm going to ask a few questions that may be below my level in sales, but I'll get up to speed quickly. So I enrolled myself in a course. I started worked with my boss, who's a great mentor in how to do sales and how to get up to speed. But then I guess from the other angle would be if you come into this role as a sales professional, really taking the time to use your product. So take some time to play around in the software, ask questions, read the documentation you're providing to clients so that you have the ability to understand your software well, from a product lens too, so that you know how partners will interact with it. Because you're going to be asked a lot of technical questions, and you need to be able to understand how different types of software will complement yours so that you can best understand the client experience. So I think being really transparent with where your strengths are, I think it's really cool that you can add value in different places, but there'll always be something to learn, and just being very open and honest about what you need to learn and being very hungry for that information when you come into new roles.
Yeah, I think that's really great general advice. And hearing you talk about that kind of brought another question to my mind of how did you coming into your role, did you feel like you needed to work on getting buy-in from sales to work with partners, or to or was that kind of just a part of the organization's culture or something that you feel like you had to help cultivate?
So it has been a really great experience with LogicGate specifically that our leadership has majorly bought into our partner program. They are so supportive of it. It's constantly reiterated from leadership that partners are a great success tool, great opportunity for us to look for revenue. I think that across the board, in my opinion, a lot of the buy-in from sales comes from upper leadership. I'm a younger partner manager. It's great. All of our sales team is so respectful of me and works really great with me. But I know I've seen and heard from colleagues that it's difficult to get that buy-in. And I think that having that driver from the people who are determining their success, so their bosses, the higher ups in your organization, it needs to be an entire organization commitment to partnerships in order to drive that revenue. And then, focusing on what drives your sellers and figuring out how to best support that. And so we really have our sales team has a lot of visibility into what we do. We've been given a lot of time to speak with them. We're always granted time during big organizational events to kind of discuss partners, and that helps a ton. But I think I've seen from previous organizations as well as from colleagues in the space that without that leadership buy-in, it's really difficult to gain traction in your sales team. So I'm really grateful for the organizational structure at LogicGate for helping support us.
Yeah, that's why I asked the question because I've definitely heard that side from a lot of other interviews and other tech partner managers that I've spoken to. So yeah, you're in a good spot.
I like it a lot.
Yeah. That was my last question. Thank you, Catherine, for taking the time. Is there anywhere where our audience can connect with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So my LinkedIn is great. Probably the best way to reach me. It's under Katherine Tooley. I think there you can find a little bit more about my background. I'm always happy to answer messages and connect with people and other partner leaders as well. Anybody who's interested in getting the space, especially, young women engineers who are looking for that dynamic piece of their next role. I'm always happy to talk to anybody who's interested.
Amazing. Thank you so much for taking the time.